Good morning, Valencia. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rick and Charlie, for the invitation. My presentation is called What Can TV and Online Learn from Each Other? Here's a fact. Television and online are now the number one and number two media in terms of time spent in the US and many other countries. I think that may explain the vicious rivalry between television and online salespeople. As a media director would see it, on one hand you have a well-paid sweet talker who sits by the phone taking orders but doesn't really know how to prove its own ROI. On the other hand, you have a television salesman. Believe me, I used to be one. But over the last few years at Fox International Channels, we've built one of the largest television sales organizations outside of the US, and more recently, one of the largest international online ad networks specialized in online video. Now that gives me the luxury of going around the world talking to clients, salespeople, and even traffickers on both sides of the aisle, all without ever having to even pretend to understand a thing, and I think this presentation will show it. For instance, last year I was talking to a group of media directors in Chile, and I asked this rhetorical question. Imagine that you're stuck in a deserted island. Which one medium as a user would you want to take? I wasn't surprised when all hands went up for the internet, up from 50-50 if I had the same question just a few years ago. Now, make no mistake, that simply reflects the fact that now you can get some TV over the internet, plus the ability to send an email asking to be rescued at the right time, that is, when the apocalypse is over. Now imagine, I went on, that to the media directors, that you were rescued from the island and you come back, you're given the account to advertise it as a tourism destination. Which one medium would you use, TV or the internet? Of course, all hands were up for TV, causing the very puzzle faces I wanted. The mismatch is predictable. TV continues to be the best medium when you want to reach both the brain and the heart. But online brings everything that a TV planner ever dreamed of. Controlling frequency, delivering a message to different kind of consumers, or delivering different messages to the same consumer in a sequence. So why is it that after so many years of trying, there's a nagging sense by many people that you can't build a brand online? I'm here to tell you that you can. And I'm also here to tell you that television is as effective as ever. Yet, without denying that they're very different animals, I will argue that they share a lot of the same DNA, and thus they have a lot to learn from each other. Let me first add the caveat that when I'm talking about online, in general, I'm talking about all forms of online display, including rich media and video. In other words, the formats that allow you to start a conversation with a consumer. These are the lessons from TV to online, and think of them as a dialogue between a mentor and a mentee, where both of them think they have more to offer to the other that the other one is prepared to understand or can understand, but they still would be wise to listen to each other. Equally, there are some lessons from online to TV that are just as important. Let's take the first one. First lesson, I would say, if I were television to online, is prove that you have a measurable effect on sales in the short term and the long term and get attribution for that effect. In the 80s, there was a giant shift of marketing dollars from television and other forms of media to trade promotion. Nobody doubted that television could build brands in the long term. But if you were a product manager at P&G and your average tenure was 6 quarters, you knew the sure way to increase sales this quarter was to put more money on trade promotion. The problem was that most of that money was chasing share at the expense of margin and future sales, and ultimately subsidizing private labels. Accenture, and I think you're going to see this slide a couple of times today, estimated that in 2005, at the industry level, $25 billion in trade promotions only generated $2 to $4 billion in incremental sales. But too late. Those $25 billion are now a cost of doing business, and television never got them back. However, it did manage to reverse part of the ship. That is in large part because through the use of single-source research chronicled by John Philip Jones in When Ads Work, it managed to prove that it could drive sales in the short term, not just preference or intention, which were both seen as proxies for long-term results, and it managed to get some of the momentum back. The good news for online is that online already has its own single-source study. Comscore, and Jan Fulgoni will talk about this in his next presentation, recently proved that online ads do have an effect on sales that can be measured independently of whether people click on the ads or not, and that most of the effect happens offline. The talk is now about attribution, how much of the effect is due to display ads versus search ads. At .fox, we're working with Comscore and some media agencies in the UK to replicate this study, but adding online video, which we believe will add further to the results of search and display. Second lesson, if most of the effects of advertising are long-term, don't optimize based on gut reaction. If I tell you that these are the click-through rates for 2 banner ads, you think that the one in the right is better, right? So you think an optimizer should put more of the one in the right. Well, look at them and think again. Yet you'd be surprised how many times a high CTR is automatically assumed to mean a more effective online campaign. Smart pricing. Call me old-fashioned, but before we invent new pricing models online like cost per engagement, can we first fix the fact that these 2 impressions are assumed to be equal? One of the things that television got right was that as an interruption-based medium, it should charge advertisers based on the length of the ad. Compare that to what happened to some radio stations, which no long ago were charging the same for a 60 or a 30. There's a reason for this. Online started as an interactive version of print, which also ignores time. But as it migrates to an interactive version of television, it needs to incorporate time spent into the ad metric, just as it has already into the Comscore audience metrics. At the same time, online should resist the temptation to price itself based on the actions of a minority that's not representative of the whole. The TV example is MTV wouldn't price a buy on adults 50+. Then why does online so readily accept a cost per click based pricing where most of the benefit comes from that silent majority that never or rarely clicks on ads? Creative matters more online. And this is where I'm going to get the pushback. We all know there's a wide range of results from one television campaign to the next. This is a chart from When Ads Work from John Jones. Now, few will disagree, not all, but few will disagree that most of the difference can be explained by the creative, or more of the difference can be explained by the creative than the media plan. But that makes sense for 2 reasons. First, there haven't really been that many breakthroughs in television planning since the 90s. And 2, Maria Luisa and Steve and all the media agencies have gotten so good at it that there isn't a huge room between the media metrics themselves. For instance, take 2 clients with a 100-point flight, and this maybe was more true in last year than in a recession environment like this one, the one we're right now. Take 2 clients with a 100-point flight. The CPM will move from 16 to 20. The reach will move from 48 to 51. The spot can be 30 seconds or half a minute. Now, that's not the case at all online. CPMs, reach and frequency curves, formats, even types of targeting are widely different. Does that mean that creative matters any less online? No, for 2 reasons. First, even if you're paying 1/3 of the CPM of your next client for the same plan, you can still add another 3x to your advantage through good creative. Second reason, if creative matters so much in a medium where it can interrupt, like television, it should matter even more, not less, in a medium where it can't. Look, it gets better. On TV, you usually sacrifice targeting for scale, and you create an ad, try to hit your target in the middle, but not turning off anybody else. Online, you don't have to choose between targeting and scale. You could define your target very broadly, including buyers and non-buyers, and slice it up based on where they are in the purchase cycle and what kind of messages they react to, and tell them what they need to hear. Let's take an example, an ad for a Mini Cooper. Some people want to hear that it saves gas, some that it saves the planet, some that it's easy to park, some that driving one is a sign that reverses security and masculinity. At the same time, other people want, and I borrow Andrew Ehrenberg here, need to be nudged, others sold, and others converted into brand ambassadors. Given that in online so much of the effect comes from what's called leverage or momentum, in this world, it would be such a wasted opportunity to take somebody who is already a happy buyer and not convert it into a brand ambassador and instead trying to make him buy something that he has already bought. I'm not saying that predicting this in advance for each customer would be easy or cheap. That given that online is the only medium where we could have the luxury of doing so, it's worth a try. I know it's feasible because the people at Fox Interactive Media have been doing what they call hyper-targeting for a few years now. Next lesson, find a way to charge for your content. How many times have you read a blog that says, content wants to be free? Well, I'm sorry, I talked to content this morning and he didn't tell me that. And then I talked to content creators and he very much wants to get paid. And in any case, the total advertising pie, this example is the UK, is finite, and it can't alone fund free unlimited content forever, particularly when less of it is going to the content companies. By the way, am I the only one seeing the parallel here where money is moving from above the line to below the line, yet sometimes profits don't go up?